Is your team not performing well? Is morale low and turnover high? Are you falling further behind the competition? I'm here to help. I'm your host, Shani, and this is the Leadership Show, where business strategy and culture finally meet, and we make the long-awaited shift from rhetoric to results. I promise I'm not your typical boring leadership consultant, and I will help you get your shift together. Let's do this. Welcome, Leadershifters, to another episode of the Leadership Show with Shani. I am welcoming back for a second time Femily, also known as Silicon Valley's gender and inclusion strategist. Our first interview, we could have talked for days. And so I decided, you know what, let's cut, and we're going to come back again. And so today is Femily Part 2, and specifically, we're going to ask Femily to share her wisdom about if you're a good guy in this Me Too era, what are the new rules of the road for you? Like, what should you do? What shouldn't you do? And we're going to go through a litany of things from mentoring and, just like what to do if you see something that is sort of like walking the line or inappropriate. And then we will answer all those questions that you kind of have in your mind, but maybe haven't known who to ask, right? So, Femily, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Shani. I'm so glad to be here. This was the remaining nugget of that juicy conversation that we had last time. So I'm so glad we get to dedicate time specifically for the male leaders out there who are the good guys in the office, the good male leaders. They aren't the creeps, and they want to make sure that they maintain that good image and are able to help their female colleagues just like they help their male colleagues.
Absolutely. And I think this is such an important conversation because most guys are good guys. And what I was starting to see in this Me Too era, obviously great that women now have a platform and more safety to come forward with these things. That's all great.
Yes.
The dark side of what I think you and I both saw happening with clients was men were like, oh, well, you know what? I just want to better safe than sorry. Even if I don't intend something, I don't want to mentor women anymore or whatever. And it's like, no. Like, this is not an excuse, guys, to back away from professional relationships with women. It's even more important now than ever. You just got to be mindful. And so we're going to let Femily give us some tips today about what that looks like so that you can go back and feel comfortable doing what you've always done with high talent, high potential women, right?
And men, absolutely. Yeah.
Right, of course.
You're right with the research. So 1 in 6 male managers is now saying that they do hesitate to mentor junior females on their team, which is not only, awful for those junior females, of course, but it's also awful for business. Any business that is saying like, well, we can't really mentor this certain proportion of our employees, like that's not going to be the best business out there.
Sure. Absolutely. All right. So let's get right into it. I know you were telling me that when this was coming up, you did a survey of a bunch of women. And so just tell us a little bit about the survey and what the main takeaways were.
Yeah, absolutely. So in early 2019, after I saw the research that said that some men were hesitating to mentor their junior colleagues, I polled my San Francisco community and Silicon Valley community of ambitious and accomplished women, executive and junior women in the biggest international corporations, the fastest moving startups, the most interesting nonprofits, entrepreneurship, education, healthcare, right? So a wide spectrum of places.
Okay.
So the number one thing that I heard repeatedly from nearly all sectors is that it's not just enough for men to not harass women. Like, that's certainly a great place to start, right? Obviously, but we're talking to the good guys here, so they know this, right? They're not going to be harassing women. So I kept hearing, I wish more of the good guys understood that it's not enough to just think of yourself as a good guy, because you definitely wouldn't harass women. But we now, in this modern era, we need the good guys in our offices to take action.
Yeah.
And so the kinds of actions that we're talking about are simpler than you'd think, and they're less of putting your neck out there than you'd think, but it still counts as allyship. So some of those things are advocating for female colleagues who are doing great things in the office, right? And asking, saying like, can Sherry co-lead this project with me? I'm really busy. She's really awesome in this area. Can we both tackle this together, right? So sponsoring junior women, suggesting women's names when they are top talent who happen to be female, suggesting them for, the step up projects, the juicy projects that lead to promotion. Something that can be trickier is bringing conversation back when people are interrupted. So when the shows that women get interrupted in meetings more than men, and guess what? Women and men are the interrupters, right? It's just that all of us of all genders are interrupting women more than we're interrupting each other. So when you hear someone get interrupted as a man in the office, you can say, oh, Frank, I loved your point, but can we also hear Miranda? I wanted to hear, I don't think you were finished, right? It can be, please, I mean, the more graceful you can be, the more lighthearted, the less it has to be an issue.
Right.
Yeah. So a couple more things that the women in the office said were, if you hear uncomfortable conversations starting about women's bodies or sex or other topics that are not G-rated or aren't necessarily going to make every woman and every man for that matter feel comfortable and feel like it's a G-rated work conversation, just redirect the conversation back or add another topic to the conversation. If you're in a group of 6 at dinner, maybe you don't want to take the whole conversation into a new zone. That would feel too much for you. So then just start talking to the person next to you about something totally else, like weather, travel, books, sports, art, a theater, like anything that's a little bit more G-rated. So that then there are conversations people can take part in. Yeah.
Right. Which is a great strategy for inclusion in general.
Yes. If you hear an icky conversation and you don't feel brave enough / safe enough to say, like, I'm not sure that's what I'd agree with in terms of that group of people or something, right? If you can't do that because it's your boss, it's your main funder, it's your client, right? Then starting a different conversation where you're then not a part of that it's like a notch down, but it can be very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So advocating for women, whether it's for stretch assignments or promotions, making sure that interruptions, that if someone's interrupted, that they respectfully bring it back and let that person finish the point, redirecting or starting new conversations if it feels like the content is, very sort of shifted to one side or not G-rated. What else should the good guys be doing?
Yeah. So another thing that happens to women in the workplace that men can really step up for. Women often get assigned the sort of office housekeeping stuff, like party plan. Can you circulate this card for Bill's birthday and get everyone to sign it and add $12 or whatever? And so yes, we're in an office and corporate environment. People have to do those tasks that aren't really going to lead to promotion, but that they're like part of what makes the company warm and friendly and culture-y.
Yeah.
But it more often falls on the shoulders of women, right? So can you set up for the party, etc. So one thing that men can do is step up and make sure that they're doing as much of that kind of note-taking, calendaring, social end of things. So that, because when they step in and do it, then it allows a woman to like have 30 minutes more at her desk or with the client or pounding away at those deliverables that will lead to promotion.
Right. And there's no harm in asking people to volunteer, but don't just ask women, right? Ask everyone to, hey, can you, ask a broad range of people, hey, can you come half an hour early and help us set up?
Exactly. And then if you notice that it was just women that came, or mainly women, or mainly even just the same people, and maybe it's just your junior staff, right, or whatever, that are coming to do the setup, then you can always say like, well, I noticed Marsha and Tim and Llewellyn set up. How about you, Gary and Paul and Phil? Can you clean up? Like, also a great tip for family Thanksgivings. If the women,
right, exactly. If I do the cooking, you do the cleaning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So share the responsibility, spread the responsibility among everybody for things that once upon a time were almost always directed to the females in the office. I love that.
Yes. And then there are some specific tips about like listening and group dynamics and touch and sports metaphors. So do you want me to mention a couple of those?
Yeah. I mean, let's just have them all.
Let's do it. Okay, great. So on listening, Sometimes in the boardroom or in the meeting room, a woman will say an idea and then it won't be really heard by her peers, and that'll be made clear because 2 ideas later someone will basically reframe her idea, and then everyone will say, someone, a lot of times it's a man or someone more senior, will say, oh, that person's just given a genius idea. So
Yep.
kind of into the interrupting one, a nice ally, male ally, or a senior woman can often say, that's genius, Larry. I see what you were picking up and building on what Maria said. It's awesome. It sounds like there's a lot of agreement in the room because Maria said it, you said it, like making sure the credit's there.
Yeah.
And it sounds a little egocentric, but sometimes women fear that it's a little egocentric. But here's the thing. If you walk away from those meetings having delivered a brilliant idea that someone else essentially gets credit for, when it comes promotion time or bonus time or any of those other critical career advancement times, and you're not remembered for someone who contributes those big ideas that get taken and snowballed, then
Yep.
you're not going to get those kinds of juicy career advancements.
Absolutely. And, frankly, a lot of my female clients on the executive coaching side, and even, side conversations that I'm having with professional women, business people, and so forth, we talk about that. And I always recommend, like, don't just share your idea. Share your idea with intentionality, with energy, with the kind of energy that other people will hear it with, right? Don't lower your voice. Don't use filler words. Don't qualify your idea. Like, be bold, be strong, be passionate, and you're much more likely to be heard.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. Don't say things like, I'm just spitballing here, or I'm thinking out loud, or this just came to me, I'm not really sure about it. It's fine. Like, we're in a business.
Or perhaps, maybe this could be.
No,
No, get rid of the qualifying language.
Yes, absolutely. Good. I'm with you. Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna, or no, go ahead. I think there are a couple more things you wanted to note, and then I want to talk specifically about mentoring, because I think that's a super important thing.
Okay, good. So on giving advice, right, we all hear the phrase mansplaining, right? And so, it's an office workplace. We need to be able to give each other feedback and tell each other new things so that we can all learn and grow and become better and smarter,
Yep.
faster and more innovative. But in order to make it not sound patronizing, just check first if the person knows that kind of thing, right? So you can say, do you want me to tell you the background on this, or do you know it already? Do you want me to, a lot of times the mansplaining stuff happens on things that are not necessarily work related. So like someone starts explaining like the whole history of Korea, and the person's like, I'm literally from there, bro. And it's like, so I would say ask before, do you want my perspective on X, or are you good? Like, ask that, because you can offend a colleague, but you can also offend a client by mansplaining, right? So it can have real business ramifications if you don't just check first and say, like, have you read this book? Do you know the author I'm talking about? Do you know the scientist I'm referring to? Blah, blah, blah.
100%. I love that. Good tip.
Yes.
All right, so let's get into this whole topic on what do men need to make sure they are doing and not doing when they mentor. So what's changed from it since Me Too?
Sure. So I keep hearing this from well-meaning men who are in my audiences when I go speak to all male leadership at tech companies, and they say things like, you do know that the Me Too movement is dividing people in the workplace, and that men no longer want to be alone with a woman for fear of getting in trouble. So I'm just putting that out there so we know we're directly talking about that, right? So
Yep.
What I always say is, and they believe this too, they believe that figuring out how to mentor junior women is critical. It's critical for business reasons. Like, you have to mentor all of the rising stars, or you're going to leave some of them in the dust, which is not good for your business, right? So also in terms of women, when they're mentored by men, they make more money, they receive more promotions, and they report greater satisfaction with their career trajectories. That's a Harvard business stat. So based on it, so because there's now that world of fear, there are some new recommendations. And so, take what resonates. So your listeners should take what resonates and leave the rest. Like, we have very unique work cultures out there, right? Very unique humans out there. So take what resonates and leave the rest. You're dealing with a spectrum of risk here. And so
Yes.
you definitely want to take what feels right to you. The main thing underlying all of these questions are, what if I unintentionally cause sexual harassment, or what if I get falsely accused? So let's just deal with this right up front and then go into the subtler, like, how should you mentor women, right?
Great.
So the fact is, you're not going to unintentionally cause sexual harassment. If you think about any of the sort of Harvey Weinstein, Matt Lauer, any of the people you've read about in the paper over the past couple of years, like, those are not subtle things you wouldn't know you're doing. Those are horrible.
Those are not misinterpretations.
No, those are not gray area. Those are very clear, right? So you know they are explicit, they are extreme, they are repeated, they are well beyond the gray area. You would definitely know. And also, those folks were not worried about if they were going to be misinterpreted, right? And if you're already worried, it's not going to be you. Like, you're already one of the good guys. But also, the question still remains, like, what if someone accuses me falsely? Like, I get it, that is terrifying. Like, that would have ramifications for your reputation, your career, your income, your spouse, etc. Right?
Yep.
Lucky news is it's incredibly unlikely. The incidents of fraudulent reporting of sexual harassment and sexual assault are 0.05 in that range of time, right? So what we do know is that men are much more likely to be the victim of sexual assault and sexual harassment than to be falsely accused of it.
Oh, interesting. All right, let's actually say that again, because I think that's going to be news to a lot of people.
Yeah. Men are more likely to be the victim of sexual harassment. So to be sexually harassed themselves in the workplace by someone else, by a male boss or by a female boss, or to be the victim of sexual assault than to be falsely accused of it.
Interesting. It's sort of like, it makes me think of the silly movie Bad Bosses, where Jennifer Aniston played, I think she was like a dentist or something, and she was harassing her male employee. Right. Which also happens. And so listen, if whoever's listening to this, I think these tips are going to transcend direction, right?
Yep.
So,
and so the other thing to be aware of, if you're still thinking about, like, what if I'm falsely accused of a crime or something, men are 14 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of murder than of sexual assault. So if you want to learn about a wrongful conviction, just start focusing on murder, because you're 14 times more likely. It's basically like unlikely, right? So it's not, it's causing 1 out of 6 men to be scared to mentor women, but it's barely ever happens. So just, it's time to mentor women. They deserve it, and you deserve not to be scared of it anymore. Yeah. And so the other number thing that I will drop here is, so it's somewhere in the range of 3/4 to 81% of women experience sexual harassment in some form throughout their career.
Yep.
So you as the good men out there are far more likely to need the answer to, how can I help a female colleague who's been sexually harassed, or a colleague of any gender who's been sexually harassed, than the question, what do I do if I'm falsely accused, right? So speaking of that, right, what do you do? This is an environment where many women are experiencing sexual harassment in the workplace, and they are turning to a lot of these good guys in the workplace to say, this happened to me, what do I do, right? And so it's important to be a good guy in the office. You have to get this part right. So it can be a heavy topic, and it's always disturbing to hear that someone has been through something like sexual harassment, especially someone close to you. So first of all, know that it takes a lot of courage for someone in the workplace to bring this up at all, especially to another colleague. So what you do as one of the good guys is to thank her for telling you and for being so open. Don't press for details. Just let her tell you what she wants to. Don't question her fullness or her perspective. Unless you're her HR manager or the in-house counsel or the manager, right? In which case your company has rules about what you're supposed to do when someone tells you about sexual harassment. But if it's your pal at work who's telling you about this, right? Your only job is to support her. It's not to get to the bottom of it. It's not to problem solve it for her. It's to reassure her that it's not her fault if that comes up. She may not think it's her fault, so you don't need to bring the fault thing up unless she's asking if you think it's her fault. good phrases for this type of thing are like, that's really awful. I'm so sorry. That should have never happened. How can I help you? How gross. Thank you for telling me. Whatever you decide to do, I have your back. Those kinds of supportive statements are the ones that someone's looking for when they have
Right.
are in a workplace situation.
And if the woman's afraid to go to HR, if you're the man in that situation and someone's confided in you, should you encourage them, push them to go to HR? Should you go to HR on their behalf?
No, definitely not going on their behalf, because that's, again, like another consent issue, right? So she's already had like a violation of in some form related to consent. And so, and just related to her power in the workplace. So let her really determine her path. She's obviously going to be wondering, should I go? Should I not go? And I mean, if you want to be a thought partner in that, but I don't recommend that men who are just being come to be a sort of thought partner and shoulder, that they start advocating for what should happen. Only she knows how much of a risk she wants to take with her career, her personal finance situation at home, her job stability situation, how quickly she can get another job, how badly she needs this one, like how much stress she's willing to incur at a certain point in her life based on the rest of the stuff that's going on in her life, etc.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, gosh, you just rattled off a litany of considerations that not everybody would know to think about as they're being empathetic.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I think people's knee-jerk reaction is, oh, you have to report that.
Right.
And certainly in an ideal world, in an ideal work environment when there's psychological safety and there's a history of HR being supportive and all that sort of stuff, you probably are much more inclined to do that. But unfortunately, not all companies are woke that way.
Yeah. And I think if you're asking, should I go to HR? It's kind of a sign. It could be a sign that your company's not that ready, right? That you're sensing something about your culture. Because otherwise you'd be like, that person's a nightmare. I'm going to HR where it's safe and welcoming and I will not be retaliated against. Like, it seems more like an easy path if you have that kind of safe environment like you're describing.
Right. Good. Yeah. Okay. So going back to the mentoring thing.
Yes.
You gave us the statistics, which are super compelling. So men, you're 14 times more likely to be falsely accused of murder than sexual harassment. So I call bullshit if you're saying you don't feel comfortable mentoring more junior women anymore.
Yeah. There's a few tips that can make it a little more easy. So for example, how do I make sure it doesn't veer into something more, right? That she doesn't get the wrong idea, et cetera. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons people get into mentoring. So you might want to mentor all of your rising stars because as a leader, that's your job and you get it, right?
Yeah.
So they do that. A lot of workplaces now do have a women's mentoring initiative where rising junior women are assigned senior mentors of any gender. Or maybe a junior woman who's on your team has specifically asked you to be their mentor or has started asking you questions that are mentor-like, right? And you're clearly entering into a mentor relationship. So to keep it professional, basically the human brain works in a way where there's there's a give and take expected when you have a relationship with someone, a professional relationship, someone is doing work for you or in a friendship or anything, right? So people seek out this mutually beneficial equilibrium. So the junior woman is going to get business mentoring from you, right? So then the question is like, what are you getting from her? I mean, if it fulfills you business-wise to be mentoring your team, then that's something. But to make sure that you're not accidentally slipping into looking for flirtation or like validation that can get into a slippery slope, you're going to want to concretely like, what's something that this young person, this rising star, can bring to you that's going to feel as professional as the business advice she's looking for and as meaty, right? So some of these kinds of things can be I'm thinking of my senior executive males in tech. And so some of them, they are learning a lot about an audience that they're making an app for, right? They're running a tech company and it's for a younger consumer audience, right? Maybe Gen Z or millennials. And so they are learning about a certain culture more just by being in the presence of this younger person. Sometimes be more of a hobby thing, right? So someone is from a different part of the world and the senior mentor likes to travel and learns a lot about this person who has an international background, and like that's deeply interesting to them. It can be that they have their finger on the hottest spots to eat in your town, and that's invigorating to you. And just pick out a thing that, so what the give and take is, and it's more clear to you.
Right. So think of it in terms of reverse mentoring.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Right. In fact, I know one senior executive who is calling it that also, and maybe they listen to the Leadership podcast. They're getting millennial mentored. They are in their late 60s and they're getting millennial mentored. And so they ask their technology, like their outside of work technology questions, like, how do I find this thing on Twitter? And like, what's the difference between using Twitter for this and LinkedIn for this? So,
right.
Yeah.
Or, my kid's on this thing called TikTok now. How do I get on it? Right.
Right. Is it good? What should I be afraid of? What should I know? Yeah. Those kinds of things can be very helpful and can balance it out a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, terrific. So make sure that when trying to achieve that equilibrium of a give and take relationship, that it's all, there's nothing to be misconstrued.
Absolutely. And to further help that misconstruing, don't do it over drinks. Don't do your mentoring over drinks. So
okay.
Your mentoring, this works differently for different cultures, obviously. Like I know that you've come from finance and that's pretty big on meeting over drinks. And so are certain forms of consulting and different business ones, but
yeah,
meeting. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm going to Korea next week to do a workshop. And in advance of that, I asked some of my local contacts over there, what do I need to be sensitive to in the Korean business environment? And the way people negotiate and develop relationships and so forth. And so I got some really great tips around that. And they said that one of the ways that they bond over there, even professionally, is by going to do karaoke together.
Yeah. Yes, right. So that's, you bring up a very interesting point, which is like, there are some company cultures and national cultures where there's a very specific way of bonding with business. And so what's happening in this new Me Too era is a lot of women are being left out of those opportunities where you're with the high profile clients, you're doing the sort of easy trust building bonding at karaoke, for example, or at, the Chosen Steakhouse at 9 p.m., right? Or whatever. And so that is leaving out women. So there are a few shifts that are happening in the American workforce for sure, which a lot of male bosses are switching to either power lunches, because lunch has less of a romantic feeling, right? And same with and drinking feeling for many industries. And then also power breakfasts, right? So things that are taking, they're taking a lot of business by storm and they're really picking up pace. The important part there is that you do the same kind of mentoring for your junior male employees as your junior female employees. And if you feel don't feel comfortable doing one-on-one drinks with female employees at 10 p.m., don't do it with male employees either, because then you're creating an inequity.
Right.
Yep. So that's one of the tips. Make sure that all of your meetings have a very specific purpose. So if a junior employee throws a meeting on your calendar that says like drinks, Thursday drinks or something, write back and say, what are the agenda items for this meeting? And then change the name in the calendar to like mentoring session with T. Smith, as opposed to like Thursday drinks. Yeah. So keep it like that. And then also when you if you do have to go to a restaurant, even the lunch restaurant or the power breakfast restaurant, like restaurants are created to be sort of romantic and to bring that out. Like that's who they assume is going there. That's their like client number one. So waiters, it's very awkward to be out at a business meeting with someone of the opposite sex and then have the waiter think that it's a date. Right. So bring a notepad, bring your computer and put it on the table. Like bring something that is not date-ish, that's a business thing, and have it on the table, to say nothing of obviously wear your business outfit, but like sometimes people still think that it's a date for sure.
Right. So, right.
Yeah.
Good. And what about, let's take it even further. Men and women have to take business trips together. I mean, I think about, I can't even count the number of times when I was a junior when I was an analyst and associate at Goldman, when my, VP or partner were almost all men. And so I'd be the only woman traveling with either a group of men or one man. And of course, we don't want women to not be staffed on out of town clients.
Right. Yeah.
Because
So
men want to avoid that.
yeah, right. No, I mean, I agree. I mean, so keeping as many business things around while you're doing that is really important. So, because anytime someone else assumes that you're on a date, it creates a weird vibe that then you're sort of battling uphill against that vibe, perhaps with the other person, like they might get the wrong impression. Perhaps within yourself, you might get the wrong impression. Like there's a lot of ways this could kind of go wrong. So with the traveling, it's really just, if you break it down into a micro bits of what the steps are. Okay, you're sharing an Uber together. Okay, make sure you're talking business talk. Quickly curb any conversation that seems like it's going to be any of those not G-rated conversations that we had before. Sometimes people slip into that when they're traveling, because they want to blow off steam and not have, I mean, it's a natural impulse. They want to have not work on the brain 24/7, but choose work topics, the outside of work topics, like sports, like travel, that are more of a G-rated topic.
Sure.
Once you open the door of talking, about sexy, romantic, dating kinds of topics with someone of the opposite sex who's in a different power differential, it can snowball. Yeah.
Absolutely.
There are always those creeps that are going to snowball it anyways. I'm just talking about trying to just two good people trying not to get into a creepy situation, or trying not to have a dating spark fly in the midst of a business situation.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. Terrific. And so I've got a couple of other like social situations to throw out there and just get your best advice. Okay. Hugs.
Oh, I love it.
Okay. And listen, hugs, it's not like we have people come into the office and hug all the time, but let's say, it's a holiday party,
Sure.
but it's a work holiday party. And, is it appropriate to hug and a kiss on the cheek, or if you're European, a kiss on both cheeks?
Yeah.
When your female, either employees or even your counterparts are coming in, that sort of thing.
So I would say, so for the good guys out there, right, it's again a spectrum of risk. So manage your spectrum of risk how you feel most comfortable. The best advice I ever give is to stay out of that gray area game, right? We all know those colleagues who are well loved and they don't get enmeshed in that sort of gray area, like a kiss at the holiday party, blah, 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 right? The most important thing here is really about the genders. So don't touch the ladies at work or treat them physically in a way that you wouldn't treat the men. If you are giving hugs and kisses to the ladies at work, you better give hugs and kisses to the men at work.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't hug a male colleague for 10 seconds at the holiday party, or if you wouldn't touch his lower back as you scoot by him in the coffee area, then don't do that to a woman. If you wouldn't, the number of women who've told me that they've had their thighs pinched under the table because the man next to them thought he was showing enthusiasm for a project, or like calling her attention to a weird thing the other team said on the other side of the table. Like, if you wouldn't do that to a male colleague, grab a male colleague's thigh under the table, then don't do it to a female colleague. Like, here are some best safe bets to still be a great comrade, to have that camaraderie, to have that holiday spirit or whatever. I mean, a handshake can be fun and enthusiastic, right? You can do smiles, cheers, right? A fist bump, a high five, like telling someone they're great, like giving a compliment as you're handshaking. Like, there's a million ways to have a festive, happy, friendly, PG or G related interaction with a worker, but keep it gender balanced, because once you treat women differently, it's going off into that gray area.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's the hugs and any sort of touching. Really make sure you're doing it equally across gender. So if you're just like a touchy person, people aren't going to misconstrue it nearly as frequently if you're like grabbing men by the shoulder and women by the shoulder, just as part of like you're excited, for example.
Right.
And if you're a person who isn't self-aware about personal boundaries, that's another podcast.
Yeah. And also, we're not in, as we all know, we're not in an even Steven society yet where it's actually perceived as the same to do the shoulder rub to the men and shoulder rub to the women, because we're in this world where 80% of women do have a sexual harassment in the workplace history.
Sure.
You're coming into that shoulder rub having had maybe one of those before that meant, I need you to accept this shoulder rub or I'm going to fire you, et cetera,
Right.
all of these different things. So it doesn't feel the same to women. So I would say back off and just treat women great, but not physical.
Yep.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. How about just like run of the mill compliments? Like I'm guessing that women probably get them more than men. Like, oh, that's a lovely dress or beautiful shoes, or your hair looks great today. I mean, I know I give those kind of compliments to men and women.
Yeah. Which is where you're going, right? Because the equality of it all, right? It puts you in this other category of you're just a complimenter. Yeah.
And I know I consider myself sort of a stylish person, and I notice whether when someone is well put together, regardless of their gender, right, or other orientations. And I guess, and I guess I'm sort of asking this for me and my listeners, like, should we just stop complimenting anything that isn't like a business achievement, or like, is it okay to still say, I like your shirt or I like your tie?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely depends again on how much risk you want to acquire. If you want to be bulletproof, then obviously only talk about business, right? But if you want to have,
Then you're just boring AF.
if you want to have a culturally warm environment, right, where people feel good. I mean, the point here is for you to feel good and for people to feel good. So I'm trying to help you not say weird things that make people feel bad, right? So here's the thing. Yes, of course, saying someone, great report, good presentation, that's awesome, right? If you want to veer off into more, into compliments beyond work, definitely stick to those, again, that are not gendered, right? So if you wouldn't tell a man, here's two things that a man has said to me in the past year that I doubt he's saying to men. So he said, "You look like a lot of fun outside the office." Like, okay. I mean, it definitely is an innuendo I'm not that excited about,
Right. Yeah.
And someone said your spouse is one lucky person, and like that, it's just like a little. It gave me the creeps, right? Because it clearly was about romance, and he was not going to be saying that to. He was not going to be saying that to the men in his office. So
Sure.
Oh my gosh, sorry about that. Okay.
Okay, and then how about, I mean, let's just go there, because I have so many friends, men and women, who have met their partners at work.
Yes.
And I think we couldn't finish this podcast without at least touching upon, like, hey, what if you're interested in someone you work with, someone you work for, someone who works for you? What are all the dynamics there?
Okay, so let's see. So, I mean, what's true is a lot of people do meet their sweetheart in the office, right? And so there's a huge percentage of married people, and that's where they work. So, it's true that that's the case. It's definitely not without loads of risk and awkwardness if it doesn't work out. So here's the truth. Make sure that if you are going to ask someone out in the office, it's more on the life partner potential. Like, really run them through some rubrics in your mind of like, is this a life potential partner? Because if they're just a cutie you kind of want to like go on some dates with, right, but you'd never like marry a person like that or whatever, then just go find a lovely person in yoga or on Tinder or wherever, right?
Yeah.
Don't go into the office don't get someone in the office for that. But if you're like, this person might be my actual partner, wow, I really like them. First of all, if they're your peer in the company, way better than if they're not, if either of you's the boss of each other or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the power dynamic often creates challenges.
Situation. Yeah, like a power dynamic. So obviously, like, ask them out soon before either of you gets promoted into each other's boss, right?
Yeah.
Like, look in the company guide that says like either you're not allowed to date your colleagues. I mean, in higher ed, there's a lot of that. Like, professors can't date each other, can't date grad students. Like, just definitely understand what your company says about that. Here's the important part. Ask her out, or ask them out, ask the person out at work very clearly, and only because you only get one time to ask the person out. If you ask more than once, you're going into this sort of repetitive creep factor harassment, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
So instead of saying something like, hey, do you want to get drinks and like talk about spreadsheets or something where it's murky? Because is that work? Is that a date? You know, ask specifically something like, I don't want this to be awkward. And like, if you say no, I'll never mention it again. But I'm starting to feel like we might have a potential good dating vibe here. Do you want to like, can I take you to dinner? If you say no, it's totally fine. And I'll never mention it again. I might blush with embarrassment for a couple of weeks, but after that I'll be fine. So that's a very clear ask. If the answer is no, very much move on. If the answer is yes, look at your company guide to see what that says.
Yeah,
You know.
because a lot of companies, I mean, some companies forbid it outright, but I think a lot of companies just have rules about you can't work in the same business unit. And you know, like I even have a really good friend I used to work with who started dating a guy who, you know, joined our group not long after that, and they went to HR, and one of them had to move to a different group just so that they weren't working directly together, because that could be a conflict of interest. And wouldn't you know, they ended up getting married, they have 2 kids, and happily ever after.
I love it. Yeah.
So you don't, I guess it's true. You don't want to like not go there if you really do think like this could be my soulmate.
Right. If you think it's that serious, don't stop yourself, but don't marinate on it either, because you're being creepy even if you don't know it. Like, just the minute you think this, I might need to go on a date with this person, they might be my soulmate, just ask them. Like, it's not going to get better the longer you lurk around their desk. And on the other hand, the one thing I also will say about chivalry in the office, so like, if you think you want to date someone to be as chivalrous as feels like the chivalry of your heart outside of the office. Don't bring chivalry into the office for other people. Basically, because bringing up chivalry, that's really like a way of treating women in a certain way that distinguishes them from other men. And in the like pulling out women's chairs in a boardroom, letting women exit the elevator first in a business context, men walking on the outside of the sidewalk for a female colleague, or opening doors for women. Like, if you're opening doors for men and women, great. Or if you're opening doors for people who have their hands full, obviously that's great. But if you're just doing it for women, it comes from the world of them being the weaker sex.
Yeah.
When they weren't in the workplace alongside you in the boardroom. And it introduces a gendery way of interacting that most often flows into gendery notions of who should be promoted, gendery notions of who should get the stretch projects, gendery notions of who should give the tricky speech to the high octane client.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny. I interviewed a woman on this podcast, last year at some point, and she's a restaurant consultant in New York City. She has managed the back of the house for lots of big restaurants and lots of famous chefs in New York City. And now she's got her own consulting business. And we were talking about one of the ways that restaurants are training their wait staff now is to not always presume that the woman's going to order first. Like, because that's another piece of chivalry, is like, oh, you know, madam, and I hadn't thought about it, but I was like, oh yeah, that's really interesting. And so newly trained wait staffs at top restaurants now are not defaulting to asking the woman first what she wants.
That's great. I never even realized that. That's so interesting. So therefore, here's a new tip, hot off the presses. If you're out on a business outing with a man who is your peer or just a man in your workplace, and the waiter comes and asks you, the woman, to order first, be like, I'm still looking, he can order. And then it like, it upsets the gender apple cart a little so that it's not that datey atmosphere.
Yep.
It can do that is definitely much more helpful.
Good. Yeah. Well, super. Thank you for sharing all of these valuable tips around what to do if you're a good guy in this era of Me Too. Yes. So folks, just a couple of summary points here. Take action if you're a man, that, you know, even if you're not, so if it might not be a sin of commission, there still could be sins of omission. If you're not standing up for what you see as inequality in the workplace, if you're not redirecting folks who have been interrupted of any gender, if you're not redirecting conversations from places that might seem to be more R rated or beyond back to G or PG focuses, give people the benefit of the doubt that they know things instead of going right into mansplaining. So all of these things, continuing to advocate for all of your talented people, including your high potential women. Like, don't not do those things now, please. It's more important than ever now to advocate for anybody who's talented, regardless of what the walk of life is.
Right.
And please don't stop mentoring, right? It's a business imperative to continue to mentor women, and just like use your common sense, keep it professional. And I love, it's a good best practice that, you know, if you wouldn't say or do that with a man, then don't do or say that with a woman whom you're mentoring. And, you know, another thing that I've said to people is, you know what, if you wouldn't want your daughter or your wife or your sister spoken to or treated that way, then don't do it to a woman in the workplace. Like, to me, that's another way to conceptualize what may be right and what may be inappropriate. Support women who come to you if they've been harassed. Don't push them, but be supportive, have their back, and of course, keep it confidential. And last but not least, you know, with hugs and touching and restaurants and all that sort of stuff, again, just use your common sense. If you're going to do things equally, and don't just single out women because you think that that's the way it's always been done.
Right. And as I tell my clients, just take the ones of these that we've talked about today that fit your personality and your organizational culture, and then maybe challenge yourself to do some of the ones that felt a little trickier, and just try them on for size, because that's part of the growth. That's where the learning happens, right? In my experience, the women who I surveyed in my survey about the good guys, they all said, we're not expecting the good guys to be perfect or immediately flawless. We're just expecting them to help us create that inclusive and fair atmosphere, to get in the trenches with us and to work at it with us as we figure it out together. So no one's
absolutely
perfect. Yeah.
Because 3/4 to 80% of women having been harassed in the workplace is not okay, right?
No.
I mean, do you happen to know off the top of your head what this like statistic is for men being harassed in the workplace, just out of curiosity?
It's in the below 10%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not okay. And I would love to 20 years from now be having this conversation and hear that there's more parity, that, you know, because there's always going to be the inappropriate idiots who,
right.
and, you know, but 20 years from now or sooner, I'd love to be able to get on a podcast with you and say, gosh, look at all the progress we've made. Like,
Yes.
you know, since 2019,
Yeah.
now only, you know, some single digit number of women are being harassed in the workplace. God, wouldn't that be wonderful?
Right. Like the same number of women and men who get their wallets stolen by a colleague in the workplace. Just a small, like someone's going to do a bad thing in the office. Like, but I want it to be that kind of weird, low, not expected number, not universal experience. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. So if people have other questions or want to bring you in to help them with gender and inclusion in the workplace, how to reach you? Best way to reach you?
You can find me at my website, which is Femily on the Go, FEmilyonthego.com.
Love the creativity behind that. Thank you for joining us again today. This is so valuable and so critically important. And leadershifters, you know how to reach me. Hello at theleadershipproject.com and all the various social media platforms. And let's hear from you. Like, if you have a question, shoot it to me. And if I don't think I know the answer that Femily would give you, I'll troubleshoot it with her on your behalf.
Perfect.
Okay?
Happy to help.
Until next time, have a good one. And mwah. And that kiss is directed to everyone equally.
I love it.